Greetings and welcome to Conversation with Tony Mobley. On Conversation with Tony Mobley today, I am talking with Chris Sabato. And this is episode 109 of Conversation with Tony Mobley. Thanks to everyone for being a part of this new journey powered by Mimo Live. We also want to thank everyone who has been a part of the old infrastructure. I want to thank the team behind Conversation with Tony Mobley for all of your hard work. You can go to conversationwithtonymobley.com and there you can participate in the Mukana chat. There you can put in your questions and those questions can be voted up and down. And this is courtesy of Alex Lindsay in 090. Again, you can go to conversationwithtonymobley.com, register, put in your questions, or you can put your questions in the YouTube chat. And now we're going to get started with our conversation today. And I want to welcome Mr. Chris Sabato. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
I'm so glad to have you. And the first question is, of course, who is Chris Sabato?
Well, in my personal life, I'm a father of two daughters, and I'm born and raised in West New York, transplanted out here to Oregon. And in my professional life, I am a small college athletics creative.
Okay, Chris, I'm trying to turn my volume up a little bit more because I'm not quite hearing you that well. Okay. All right. So the next question is from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman of Norfolk, Virginia. His question is, what is the best part of your job? Working with students, interviewing new solutions, or something else?
For me, it's new solutions. It's being creative and solving problems. Really, one of the best parts about my job is it's not really the same every day, and that I can, some days I'm sitting in front of a computer writing programs. Sometimes I'm editing photos. Sometimes I'm, soldering wires together, and sometimes I'm, on a giant lift looking at the inside of a scoreboard. So it's a little bit different every day. And one of the things I really enjoy is solving problems and finding creative solutions for those problems.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And we have a question from James Folson of Minneapolis. And his question is, I hear you're working on an office hour inspired approach to community in college athletics. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes. Today was kind of our first Zoom session, and really I wanted something similar um to the way office hours was way back in the beginning. This is never going to be it's never going to be a show, or there's never going to be a crew or anything like that, but I wanted a place where my peers and colleagues across the country, we could kind of get together and talk about problems and solutions um, that are kind of specific to our needs. And one of the things being in the small college realm is that there's people wear a lot of hats, and things that fall under my job description at a place down the road at Oregon or Oregon State, they would have 30 people to do all those things. And so in the small college realm, we're wearing a lot of hats, and we're trying to solve a lot of problems, and a lot of different problems from different kind of spheres. And I wanted a place where people could just kind of get together and talk about some of those things and ask questions, and similar to like to office hours, where someone says, here's a problem, and then the people try and solve it in the moment. And there's obviously there's Facebook groups and forums and chats, and some of that stuff is great. Um, but a lot of times there's problems and questions that I think are better answered if you can kind of chew on them a little bit and um, kind of digest what the problem is and maybe ask some follow-up questions and things like that. And um, we'll see. I'm hoping that it picks up some steam and
I
keep
hope
going.
that you'll keep us updated. I'm looking forward to hearing what this process turns into. I'm looking kind of excited for you. I think it's going to be great. We have another question from James, and he says, can you discuss the mix between competition and community in sports? How has that shaped you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think a lot of that mix kind of depends on where you are in your career or in your sports career or whatnot. When I was growing up in in high school and playing sports in high school, there was not a lot of it. I mean, there was a community amongst our team, but we did not like the other team and had no interest in being friendly with them. Um, as you get older, that kind of changes. When I got into college athletics, and specifically coaching track and field, and I was a pole vault coach. And the pole vault is an event where there is a lot of community amongst pole vaulters, and that pole vaulters, you're there and you want to beat the other person, but you're always helping them out. Hey, can you catch my step? Hey, whatever. And there is just this community amongst pole vaulters. And now that I've kind of moved on past coaching and into kind of the administrative realm, where you know a colleague of mine across the country, while our teams may play, we're not competing against each other. And so I'm more than happy to share some tidbits of my knowledge to them, and they can share their knowledge with me. Um, and that camaraderie of just kind of sport and being involved in it, I think is really huge, especially in the small college realm. Maybe a little different when you get up to big D1 schools, but in the small schools there's a lot of camaraderie amongst the at least the administrative side of things.
Have you had a lot of your peers at other universities reach out to you to ask what you're doing, how you're doing it?
Yeah, I am a staunch believer in sharing my knowledge. I think when I share what I know, one, it will make other people better, but it makes me better. And the best way that you can learn something is to teach someone else that thing. Like when you're trying to teach somebody something, it just makes you learn that subject even more. And so I am more than happy to share all the things that I'm doing and things that I've created and whatnot. And on one hand, I want to, just share that knowledge. On the other hand, it's something that I'm proud of, and I think this is really cool. And I want you to see that this cool thing that I made. And so there's kind of a double-edged sword there. But so I do a lot of sharing like that, and I have colleagues all over the country that will give me a ring or send me an email and say, hey, I saw this thing you did. Can you explain to me how you did that? And with the same regards, there are people that I follow online that I will do the same thing. It's like, hey, I saw that how you posted that. Can you give me some insight on how to do that? And for the most part, people are pretty willing to share that knowledge.
So can you talk a little bit more about the fact that you are essentially running your media program by yourself? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're a small college, and we don't. I'm a department of one essentially. And at Willamette University here in Salem, we have our athletics communication staff is technically two people. It's me and Robert McKinney, and Robert does all the things that like an old school sports information director would do. He writes stories, he does the stats, he does all that stuff. And I do everything else. So I do all the social media, I do a lot of the graphic design and the video production and stuff like that. And it's all on my shoulders. And sometimes that means making decisions on things like, hey, I, I can't do that. I don't have the capacity to do all these things. And sometimes it's frustrating for me because I'm an idea person where I'm like, this is a great idea. Let's try and do this. And I'll try it and, figure it out. And ultimately it's like, that was awesome, but I don't have the capacity to keep doing that without dropping something else. And so that's a lot of what I'm doing, is trying to manage, my capacity, and how can I add things, and how can I make things better, and how can I improve things and do cooler stuff, without, adding more burden to what I do. And so, like you said, I do all our broadcasts, and a lot of kind of what I do on a daily basis is figure out ways to streamline things, to automate things, to make things take less time, so that if we have, 3 events going on at the same time, I can manage that load in a sane way, in a sane-ish way. There's times when it's a little
You- you-
crazy, and it's just there's days in this on, we pull up the schedule for the fall or the spring, and there's a couple dates on the calendar where we circle them, and like, that's going to be a crazy day, and we just get through it.
okay.
But for the most part, it's like I said, trying to find ways to minimize the load, and things that I can do during the week that make, the weekends faster and stuff like that.
Is there a possibility of you getting student help or student
Yeah, I
interns?
mean, there's a possibility. um, Unfortunately, it will limit, the students we have at Willamette. They're not predisposed to this type of work. And so I've had student workers in the past, but they're hard to come by. Just the general nature of the students we get at Willamette, they're not really interested in doing this type of work. And um, they're not. Um, I've had a couple pretty good workers, but even the ones that were my best workers, they were not curious about how everything worked. I could bring them in, show them how to push buttons, show them how to plug things in, and they could do it. But if it didn't work, they weren't really interested in figuring out why. And in this type of work,
Okay.
that's huge. You got to have some curiosity. You have to, if you have no interest in figuring out why something doesn't work, you're never going to really learn how it works to begin with. And um, I think that's just some people have it and some people don't. And so for me, it's been a struggle, to find those people who are really interested in, this kind of work.
Gotcha. Okay. So we have another question from Clark Lopez Waterman of Norfolk, Virginia. His question is, have you always liked sports?
Yes, yes. I've always been a sports person. Um, in my old age, I've realized that I'm less of a sports fan. Um, I played sports growing up. I played Little League. I played Pop Warner football. I graduated high school with 16 varsity letters. So I played a lot of sports. I did 4 years of track and field in college, and I've worked in college athletics for what almost better part of 2 decades. Um, and so I like being around sports. But recently, I realized that I'm not a sports fan. Like, I like being around sports. I like competing in sports, but I don't like sitting down and watching sports just because. There's some people, like, on a Sunday afternoon, they're like, football. I'm watching all the games. I'm a diehard Buffalo Bills fan, and I will watch every Buffalo Bills game that there is, no matter they're winning or losing. I want to see it. But once that game's over, I'm turning off the TV and watching something else. I'm not interested in the other sports teams. And so I have an affinity for teams, but not a strong affinity for watching the sport itself, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, I want to go back to the 16 varsity letters. So can you give us the breakdown?
Well, yeah, you take that with a grain of salt. I went to a small Catholic high school in upstate New York. I had a graduating class of 50, I think, so small school. But um, I had six varsity letters in track, 6 in wrestling, and 4 in football. And so I was on the varsity track and the varsity wrestling team when I was in 7th and 8th grade. And so I got in the small pond that was Notre Dame High School in Batavia, New York. I was a big fish, and outside of that,
All
not so
right.
much.
All right, I understand that. I understand that too. I was in a similar situation. I went to a the enrollment is much larger now, but I think my graduating class was 40, and
Yeah.
I was captain of the basketball team and student government president at the same.
Yep. Me too.
So yeah. So we have another question from Clara Lopez Waterman. His question is, what is the biggest challenge you face with the work that you do?
The biggest challenge is not having enough resources. Because I have big ideas and I have ideas of the way things should be, and I can't always do those. I sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's money. I don't. I can't get the money to pay for equipment. Sometimes it's a lot of times it's people. I don't have the people to accomplish the things that I want to do, um and it's a combination of the resources and a lack of understanding by outside people what resources it takes to accomplish these things. You know, I like to think I make things look easy, and I think that is problematic for me personally, because people see the things and they're like, "Oh, this is easy, right?" Well, no, it's not easy. It's a lot of work to get this end product for this thing, and um, that sometimes is a struggle in that, like, I want to do things, but I can't because I don't have the capacity. And people are saying, "Well, this is easy. Can't you just do this?" And like, no, I can't just do that. There's a lot of work, and um, people see things online, and especially in this day and age of big schools like Oregon and Notre Dame and Michigan and Clemson, and where they just go to the back room and pull out bags of money to do some of this stuff. And um anytime someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I saw this thing that such and such state's university did," it's just like, we probably can't do it because we don't have the resources. And sometimes that's hard. So that's one of the things I struggle with.
Do you, w- do you think that you are competitive when it comes to what you're actually able to do based on your budget?
Absolutely. When you talk about bang for your buck, I think Willamette University gets a lot of bang for their buck for what we do. Um, it's one of those things where I don't. Nobody is irreplaceable. Um, but if I left Willamette, I think they would have a hard time doing the things that we continue to do, um, because of my skill set. And so I think we do a lot of cool stuff. And I think on the scale of, comparing us to other our peers, I think we are, with them or above them in a lot of cases. And when you talk about resources, and especially in college athletics, it's all about choices. So we're a small school and there's another small school down the road. Our total budgets are in the ballpark. They're similar, but we do things differently because we make choices on things that we think this is more important than that. So we spend more money on this than that. And they think that's more important. So they spend more money on that than this. And um, that's always tough when you are comparing places like that, because you need to look bigger than that one thing that you're looking at. And like in this case, yeah, we do way better than them. But in this other case, they do way better than us because they have spent their money differently than us. So it's hard comparing in that respect.
Have you thought about replicating what you are actually doing and selling it or offering it to another university?
No. I have come up with many things that someone people have said, "Hey, you should sell that or you should productize it." That's not in my DNA. I don't. There's some people that just have that entrepreneurial, like, bug in them that they like constantly doing, and it's just not me. It's just like, no, I don't want to. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I don't want to deal with other people and making them happy. And, that's just not, it's not who I am. It's not in my DNA.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. We have a question from Lou Perez of Phoenix, Arizona. His question is, can you share with us how you have used automation to deliver products for your audience that allows one man production to offer the features and quality usually required multi-person teams?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, a lot of what I do is trying to figure out ways I can make things easier and faster. And, um, you know, adding components to our broadcasts without adding more work. And so I have a lot of custom Python programs that I've written to do various things, to take stats and manipulate them. And I use a Stream Deck, and I can just push a button on the Stream Deck and it'll pop up the stats for a player. And I there's a lot of stuff like that. We're just like custom little programs that I've written to save me time and enable me to um, do multiple things at the same time. In our typical sports broadcast, I'm switching between several cameras. I'm running instant replay. I'm showing graphics, and I'm managing the audio. And in a bigger school, that would be a person for each one of those jobs, maybe more than one. Um, and so for me, it's just a matter of figuring out how I can lay out my Stream Deck and how I can do things that are um, I can get to things within quick reaches and like just single button pushes instead of multiple button pushes. And anytime I can reduce the number of button pushes, that makes the thing I'm trying to do quicker. And so yeah.
That's fantastic. Can you talk a little bit more about your infrastructure in terms of, you mentioned the Stream Deck. Can you talk about some of the other tools you have in your arsenal?
Yeah, so our broadcasts are all driven through vMix. We use vMix on the PC to do all our broadcasts, and I control all those broadcasts through a Stream Deck and the use of Companion. And so I have the Companion software installed on a computer, and I have my Stream Decks plugged into that Companion um, computer, and then that Companion computer talks to all of the vMix boxes that we have. And so from one Stream Deck, I can control any one of our broadcast boxes. And we have a mix in terms of cameras. We've got a mix of SDI and NDI. Um, uh, most of the sports we cover, we have a couple primary SDI cameras, and then some tertiary NDI cameras that are in some places where we can't easily run SDI cable. But yeah, everything's vMix. And I love vMix because it's so customizable. I can do so much in it, and I can program against it, so I can write programs to do things in vMix.
Sounds exciting. Um, can you talk about can you talk more about the the um, things that are on your workstation, your main workstation, in terms of um, give us a little bit of the magic.
um yeah, so I can give you a behind the scenes look. You want to see behind the scenes? Let's see.
Absolutely.
Let's go here. So this is my office in the garage. um I've that is my Zoom monitor. It lets me get a little bit without having a teleprompter. It lets me get a little better eye contact in Zoom. And then I've got my pulling things off the wall. I've got my Stream Deck here that can control my vMix operating system, and I'm using a Henry Engineering Sports Pod that allows me to myself real quickly. Um, and that's kind of my home setup. At At the office, it's a little different because it's really more designed for as a production studio. So in my office there, I have two vmix rigs that so we can do two simultaneous broadcasts at the same time. um, I'm also in charge of all our photography, so also in my office is a backdrop so that, and I have lights hanging in the ceiling, so if I need headshots, someone can just come in and I can just take some headshots in the flash, and everything is all set up and everything looks consistent from photo to photo. And so that's, another one of the big things I do.
So how many sports are do you have at your school that you
One
that you are
20
producing?
21. We have 20. I think we have 21 sports. We don't stream all of them. Like, we don't stream men's and women's golf. We don't stream men's and women's cross country. We rarely stream men's and women's track and field. That's primarily because the timer. I run the timing system for track and field, so I can't do the timing system and do the streaming at the same time. But other than that, we stream in the fall. It's men's and women's soccer, women's volleyball, and football. In the winter, it's men's and women's swimming, men's and women's basketball. In the spring, it's softball, baseball, lacrosse, and we also stream tennis in the spring as
Wow.
well. So
Tell
lots of
me
sports.
what does thanks for that. Tell me what it means to be a level 1 coach.
It doesn't mean much. It used to back in the day. USATF is um, the organizing body for track and field in the United States, and they run a program to certify coaches, and you go through couple classes and take a test and prove that you have some level of competence in what you're talking about. um, so it's a thing that I have. That Yeah, it meant more when I was coaching, and when I did it, and not it doesn't mean as much anymore. It's been a long time since I've been a coach.
Do you miss it?
Yes and no. Sometimes I miss um, getting to work with the students. I don't miss the hours. I probably work more hours now, but it's more it's more in my control. When I was coaching, I got home. I didn't get home every night until 7:30. And at the when I was still coaching, my daughter was still young, and it's just like it was hard to get home, and then she goes to bed 5 minutes after I get home. And so once I switched over to the admin side, like I said, I probably work more hours, but it's way more flexible. And for the most part during the week, I'm home every night when the kids are home. Weekends
Okay.
are harder, but yeah.
Well, I want to definitely say at this time, thank your wife and your children for um, sharing you with us this evening. It was evening. It's after 8 p.m. For me, but I think it's like early evening for you. So,
Yeah, it's only
um,
5:30 here, so
well, thank them so much for you being with us today. Um, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you sharing your home studio. I have a question about your home studio. How much of your home studio can you control at the college um, system?
um lots. Um so for example, for a baseball broadcast, I can do everything from home. I can turn the cameras on, I can do all the broadcasts, I can do all that from right here. Some of the other sports, um, I could control it, but I need to be there physically to set up cameras and things like that. So until I get some staff that I trust where they could go and set things up, um, I still have to go in to do that thing. But I can remote in and turn if cameras are permanently installed, I can turn cameras on and turn computers on and things like that.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Um, our next question is, um, and this is a good time for those who are watching. If you have a question for Chris, this is a good time to put it in. We have probably less than 30 minutes left in the show tonight. So please feel free to ask your questions. The next question is, any suggestions for what people should do if they want to follow what you are doing, um, what you were doing at another university?
Yeah. So really, it, until it explodes, Twitter is kind of where I post most of my behind the scenes stuff and um, share cool things that I've created. And you know I I enjoy, like I said, until it explodes, I enjoy being on Twitter still, and that's where, like I said, I share behind the scenes pictures and stuff like that. And anything I think I'm doing something that's kind of cool and someone might want to see it, I share it on Twitter.
Very cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. And James is back. And James says, uh, do you hope your children get into sports? What advice will you give them if they letter in multiple sports?
Um, yeah, I do. I don't know if it's in the cards. I've tried to get my daughter to do, I tried to get her to do some wrestling, and she didn't like that. And I've tried to get her to be excited. As I said before, I'm an avid Bills fan, and Bills and Sabres. I watch every Bills and Sabres game, and I tried to get her excited about that, and she's just not interested. So we'll we'll see. Our youngest is Lucy is 10, and our youngest is almost 2. So maybe the younger one will be more into sports, but I don't, not holding my breath on the oldest.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. And we have a question from Zachary Sorensen, and I'm going to say from Queensland, Australia. Have you ever worked with people with special needs?
Not per se. Um, I haven't really had that opportunity. Um, I will say that my brother, my youngest brother, is handicapped, and he's been in a wheelchair his whole life. So I've been around um, people with disabilities, but that's not something that I've really spent much time in the workplace with. Um, more more grown up.
Okay. Please talk about your experiences as an athletic coach.
Yeah, so I was I in college, I did track all 4 years in college, and I graduated with a degree in engineering, and I thought this is great. I had an internship at IBM, and I was making for an intern without a degree, I was making a lot of money, and I thought, once I graduate, once I get a degree, it's gonna be awesome. And then the economy shifted, and all the people I knew at IBM lost their job. They closed that facility. And so I ended up, after graduation, I ended up working in IT in a job that I really didn't like. And I was way overqualified for. And I said, all right, I need to do something else. I can't do this anymore. And like, I always enjoyed um, being around the track and field, and my father was a high school track and football coach all growing up. And so I said, let's see what else is out there. And so I ended up getting a job at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. And so I was an assistant track coach there for 2 years before coming out here to Willamette, where I was an assistant coach for 9 years. Primarily, I coached the sprinters and jumpers, and specifically the pole vaulters. I spend the most time with the pole vaulters, and um, had some success as a coach, a lot of failure as a coach. It's coaching is hard. And it's a lot of it's dependent on your athletes and, what kind of athletes you have. And, um, can you get an athlete that has enough raw talent that you can mold and shape into something great? Or is it someone who's not very talented that you have to mold and shape into someone that's decent? And those are the ones that aren't as exciting, but are sometimes more personally fulfilling. Is that, that kid who came in that wasn't a very good pole vaulter, and at the end he wasn't a great pole vaulter, but he had improved a ton and was loving what he was doing, and loved seeing his progress and stuff like that. Those working with those kids was pretty fulfilling.
That's great. Um, can you talk about your move from athletics to technology?
Yeah, it was kind of a gradual transition. One of the reasons that I got hired at Willamette was because um, I could work on their website. And at the time, the track and field team had their own website. And so when I came, I could work on that website. And that was kind of, one arrow in my quiver that kind of gave me an advantage over some people. And so, for the first couple years, I started doing that kind of stuff for the track team. So I was doing website for the track team, and I was doing some graphic design for the track team. And after a couple years, some other people in the department kind of saw that, and they said, "Hey, can you do that for us?" And so that kind of gradually shifted to my job was 50% coaching, 50% this other creative stuff for other people in the department. And then as time went on, there came a point where it's like, all right, I think it's time to leave the coaching stuff behind and move full time into the creative side. And that's where I've been for 8 years, I think.
You created a job for yourself.
Essentially, yeah. Yeah. That's going back to what I said previously, that, like, nobody's irreplaceable, but if I left, they couldn't replace me. They would just stop doing the things I did.
Got you. Okay. James is back with another question. He says, can you imagine another dream job, not in sports?
um I think it would probably be something in engineering. I'm so far out of the game. I don't think I could get a job as an electrical engineer, but maybe broadcast engineer, something like that, something where I could, you know, solve problems and fix things and stuff like that. I think that would be, you know, an option.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Um, please talk about your role as a producer of streaming content.
Um, I am a producer of streaming content kind of by default. Um, I am, in reality, I'm an engineer, and I build things and put together processes and make it all work. And then I kind of have to do something once I've made it all work. And so I kind of got to put out a product once I've made all that stuff work. And so that is in the whole scheme of production. Um, the actual producing part is the part that I'm not very good at. I spend a lot of time making things work, making the switches work, making sure everything works and can look cool, and there's lots of things we can do. I don't spend enough time on um, crafting stories and things like that. Where I think, at a bigger production, um, even in sports, they're coming into that production to tell a story, and that's not something I have time for. It's kind of one of those things where, the minimum viable product, and um, that's a component that gets left out.
Okay. Um, can you tell us about when you think you might get started with your podcast?
I am not going to do a podcast. Who told you
Uh,
that?
your I'm sorry, I said podcast, but your streaming um your sharing of your streaming
Oh,
projects that we
yeah,
had earlier questions about.
that is we had our first Zoom meeting today, and there was 12 of us there, and we just kind of he said it was colleagues of mine from across the country, various similar caliber schools across the country, and we just kind of started off with kind of chatting about some things, um some problems and some solutions that we have kind of come up with. And it's one of those things where one of the great things about office hours is it's every day. And when things are every day, you can iterate so much faster. And this is not something I can do every day, and people wouldn't show up every day. And so it's finding a cadence that I can keep people interested in, and we were kind of talking today about like, well, is this something we do every 2 weeks, or is this something we do every month? I think every week would be hard for a lot of people. So I think we're gonna try and do every 2 weeks, and yeah. So
Okay, so you had your first meeting today.
yeah, yep. We this morning we had our first Zoom session, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like I have this idea of how it will go, but it can't get to there until we kind of put in some more work and have some um, more of these meetings that are, maybe not as fruitful as they could be, but just kind of learning what the process is amongst ourselves.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We have another question from James is, can you give another example of the automation you use?
Sure. One of the things that we have to do in college athletics is create game day graphics. So anytime we have a game, we need to post something to social media and says we have a game, and here's the info, and here's a cool photo and graphic to go with it. That becomes really hard when there are so many events and so many sports to do that for. And so one of the things that I did is I built a website where I can extract data from our schedule, and it pulls it into my little website. And so it says, okay, here are all the events that we have for the next 7 days. And I can go in and make some changes, and like, okay, this date's wrong, this spelling, whatever. I can here's some live stats links, here's some live video links, and I can add all that into my system. And then I will export that into a CSV file, which then I pull into Photoshop, which then takes all that and then spits out a bunch of graphics with all that information in it, which then I re-upload to that website. And then at the appropriate time each day, the website then will tweet, post on Facebook, post on Mastodon, post on Blue Sky, all those game day graphics and game day social media posts. So that's something that I was actually just telling my boss the other day. It's like, yeah, we post to Blue Sky and Mastodon. And he's like, I didn't even know we had those accounts. And I was like, well, we have them because I had already built this process for Facebook and Twitter. And so it was just adding another destination. And so that's one of the benefits of some of this automation stuff. It's like once you've built it, you can keep using it in other ways.
That's fantastic. That's very cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. Please talk about the infrastructure of the system you use at the university. We kind of already talked about that, but is there anything that you want to add?
Um, no, I could talk for hours about it. It's fascinating to me. But it's mostly it's all like I said before. It's vmix driven, and it's heavily vmix driven and data driven graphics and stuff like that. And yeah, it's yeah. I don't know how much more I could say without like taking 2 hours to do it.
Okay, okay, that's fine. Um, Laura Thompson um, has a question, and her question is, can you describe the differences in the setups between sports like football versus something like swimming?
Yeah, football gets is more important. And I say that with quotes because I don't believe that. One of the first when I got involved in streaming, we were streaming basketball and football, and um, I was like, "That's not. Why aren't we doing the other sports? It's not really fair. Like we should be doing the other sports." And so swimming was actually the second sport that we did, and we started streaming swimming. We were the first person in our conference by several years to stream swimming. Um, as a former track and field athlete, former track and field coach, um, the the difference between how sports like that versus football and basketball are treated is it's apparent and everyone sees it. And there are some things that's just how it is. Football is a beast, and there is going to be more stuff around it because there's just so much to it. Just like when we're talking about just having a football game, there are just so many more moving parts and so many more people. And so there are things like that where football will get more because of what football is, and not because it's more important. But sometimes it is because it's more important. And that's where I push back and say, no, 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 no. We're doing this for football. We should be doing this for track and swimming and whatnot as well. And we stream almost every sport we can, and we look at everything kind of through that lens of equity. And are we being equitable with how we are divvying up our equipment and our broadcasts? And it's never going to be equal. We don't have the resources for it to be equal, but we want it to be as equitable as possible. So it is what it is sometimes, but we really try to be equitable.
Do you have any students that are interested in like being sports reporters or anything like that?
No, last year I tried to I wanted to have a sideline reporter, and I reached out to our communications department and said, "Hey, I want to find someone who can be a sideline reporter," and we just couldn't find anyone. I was sad because I mean, if I was in college and everyone told me, I'd be like, "Yeah, sign me up." I'm not I'm not the best on camera personality, but it sounds fun to me.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. James is back again, and he says, can you imagine AI helping out in your processes?
Maybe. I mean, I don't. I, it is not something on my radar. Um, I could see how an AI um, could possibly do some things. We use in our gym. We have an AI camera that's mounted permanently in the gym, and during a basketball game, it will follow the ball. And so I could just turn that on and stream directly from that, and it would be something. You could follow the game, but it's not good. It's not there yet. It's not like when we had it installed. One of the questions is like, well, can we use this instead of having a camera operator? And my was like, no, we can't. This is not the same as having a person run the camera. In a pinch, we might be able to use it, but it is not the same. Uh, but that's not to say that in 4 or 5 years that it's not something that we could use. And that would be a whole lot easier if I could. I would be more than willing to pay for a bunch of AI cameras instead of having to find camera operators.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, James, for that question. All right. And let's see what we have left. Well, the next question is, what is next for Chris Sabato?
A little bit of an easy schedule. For the most part, December and January are light for us, and I think we've got a game next Tuesday, and then we've got two games in the 30th, and then not again for another like couple weeks. And so there's not much going on right now for me. And so this is um, when I can try to be a little more creative, um, when I can try to find new solutions for things. When I talked earlier about being equitable, one of the ways that we're not equitable is a lot of times when I do cool things for our broadcasts, it happens with basketball first. And it's not because I like basketball, and it's not because basketball is more important. It's because when basketball happens, there's not a whole ton of other sports going on. So that gives me time to be innovative and creative and think of new things and new things to add. And so they get added to basketball broadcasts first. And then I try and translate those to other sports as needed. So that's kind of what the next couple weeks for me is. Then we get into spring, and spring can be crazy because of the weather and changes and lots going on.
Chris, what what is next in terms of the next job or the next career?
I don't know. Um, I can I could see myself being here long term. There are I am a firm believer in that there's only two reasons people leave a job. One is because, or strike that, not leave, just two reasons people stay in a job. There's multiple reasons why people leave a job, but there's two reasons why people stay in a job. One is because they truly believe in what they're doing, in the work that they're doing, and that they believe in it and they enjoy it, and other things are not as important as those things. The other reason is it's easier than leaving. And for me, I'm more in the first part, but there's a little bit in the second part too, in that I've got a family and a mortgage, and I work in an industry that is heavily dependent on location. I can't finding a comparable job where I could live in the same house is probably impossible. Because
Right.
it's there's just not they're not. I would have to move to another city, and that's not a super enticing thing for me. But at some point, maybe if someone called and said, "Hey, we want you to come do this," I would absolutely entertain it. The other thing is that right now we live close to my wife's family, which is super helpful. If someone came and said, "Hey, we got this great job for you in Western New York, which is close to my family," okay, I could see moving across the country where we have support. If someone said, "Hey, we want you to move to Texas," that's a lot harder. Moving a whole family to another state where you have no support. So
Right.
it's not something that I'm actively pursuing, but who knows?
Very cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. You're speaking to the world. What do you want them to know?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I guess I would say, when you see creative products, understand that there's a lot of work that goes into them. And there's a lot of people behind the scenes that make those happen, and it's not always simple. So, yeah.
Very cool. And I have one last question, and I apologize for asking this question in advance because I'm asking for selfish motives. Um, do you think that your infrastructure that you're using could be used for a house of worship?
Um, yeah, it absolutely could. Um, the thing is, the infrastructure is not simple. Um, And that's where I kind of get back to where, if I left, they wouldn't replace me. They just stopped doing a lot of the stuff I did, because you kind of got it's complicated. And I can explain all the cool things that it does, but to really teach someone to implement that would be a lot of work, and someone would have to have a real heavy understanding of IT infrastructure to pull it all together. So yes, it could, but you would have to have the right person, at the helm to, put it all together.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing today. And
Absolutely.
again, we had this great conversation with Chris Sabato. Thank you, Chris. And we want to say to everyone watching, Conversation with Tony Mobley is available on the YouTube or our website, conversationwithtonymobley.com. Conversation with Tony Mobley is produced by valued audio visual professionals who meet daily in Office Hours Global, hosted by Alex Lindsay. Thank you, Mimo Live and YouTube. Conversations with real people. Stay tuned for new episodes and great conversations. And if you have time, we ask that you go back and look at the 100+ episodes of Conversation with Tony Mobley. We hope that when you do, you will see something that interests you and that may be helpful to you. Thank you, Chris Sabato, for being a part of our conversation today, for doing the work that you do, and for being the person that you are. Conversations with Tony Mobley will resume on next week. We will have a nice conversation, and I'm going to stop. I'm not going to tell you who he is, but he is confirmed, and he will be with us next week. So come and watch and see who I'm talking with next week. Take care. God bless. See you soon.